In the glittering heart of high society, where every smile is practiced and every gesture tells a story, a single dance was about to become a deadly performance. One waltz, a dozen suspects, and every step hid a clue. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Chapter 1. The grand ballroom of the Seaglass Cove Country Club was a shimmering spectacle of old-world elegance and new-world money. Beneath the cavernous ceiling, from which hung 3 colossal crystal chandeliers, the cream of local society and a sprinkling of illustrious out-of-towners swirled and swayed. The event was the annual Starlight Gala, the social highlight of the season, and this year it was in aid of the Seaglass Cove Historic Preservation Society. The air was thick with the scent of gardenias from the lavish centerpieces, expensive perfume, and the low, respectful murmur of people who were very, very comfortable. At the heart of it all was the evening's undisputed queen, Serena Van Der Woodsen, a woman in her late 50s who wore her age and her wealth with the same effortless grace. Serena was the chair of the Preservation Society and the gala's chief patron. She was resplendent in a gown of cobalt blue silk that seemed to capture the very light of the room, and around her neck glinted the legendary Starlight sapphire, a necklace that was the talk of the town and the unofficial star of the evening. As she waltzed with her husband, the stoic and perpetually worried-looking industrialist Alistair Van Der Woodsen, she was the picture of philanthropic joy. Watching from a discreet corner, a small plate of canapés in hand, was Lucy Bennett. Newly arrived in Seaglass Cove to run her late aunt's beloved bookshop, The Final Chapter, she was still finding her feet in the tightly knit community. She'd been invited by the charming and persistent Mayor Evans, who believed supporting local businesses meant dragging their owners to black tie events. Lucy felt like a sparrow among peacocks, but she was a keen observer, and the ballroom was a fascinating stage. The orchestra, perched on a dais swathed in velvet, swept into the final, soaring notes of a Viennese waltz. The dance floor was a kaleidoscope of motion. Lucy's eyes followed Serena and Alistair. Their waltz was technically perfect, a series of elegant rotations, but there was a strange stiffness to it. Alistair's hand on Serena's back seemed less a guide and more a restraint. Serena's radiant smile, which Lucy had seen falter for a fraction of a second when she thought no one was looking, didn't quite reach her eyes. As the music built to its crescendo, the dancers executed a final dramatic turn. Serena, spinning away from her husband, suddenly stumbled. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, but a slow, graceful sinking as if her bones had turned to water. The sapphire cut her throat flashed once, a final defiant sparkle, before she crumpled onto the polished parquet floor. The music screeched to a halt mid-note. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence, broken only by the rustle of silk and a single, sharp gasp. Then, chaos erupted. Alistair dropped to his knees, his face ashen. "Serena, my love, can you hear me?" The crowd surged forward, a wave of concerned murmurs and horrified whispers. Lucy, her bookseller's instinct for a story kicking in, stayed rooted to her spot, her mind replaying the last few seconds of the waltz. There was something about that final turn. The way Serena's hand had fluttered to her throat, the almost imperceptible shift in her partner's grip. It was a scene from a book, a tragic, real-life drama unfolding in three-quarter time. As the paramedics were called and the gala descended into panicked disarray, Lucy Bennett knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in her gut, that this was no simple fainting spell. The waltz had ended, but the mystery had just begun its first tentative steps. Chapter 2. The following morning, the idyllic charm of Seaglass Cove felt like a thin veneer. Sunshine glinted off the harbor, but the usual cheerful clatter from the marina was subdued. The news of Serena Van Der Woodsen's death had spread through the small town with the speed and force of a tidal wave. The official word, delivered by a weary-looking police chief Henderson at a hastily arranged press conference on the steps of the white clapboard town hall, was suspected cardiac arrest, pending toxicology. But the word suspected did a lot of heavy lifting, and the town was buzzing with unofficial theories. Lucy heard the news from Alara, her octogenarian employee at the final chapter, who had heard it from the postman who had it from the paramedic's cousin. The shop's bell hadn't even finished chiming before Alara was recounting the tale with a somber yet undeniable relish. "Such a tragedy," Alara clucked, arranging a stack of new cozy mysteries with unnecessary force. "And at the gala, I always said that woman lived at too high a pitch. The stress, you know." But Lucy wasn't so sure. She'd spent a restless night, the image of Serena's collapse playing on a loop behind her eyelids. Over a cup of strong English breakfast tea, she found herself sketching the ballroom layout on a notepad. She drew the dance floor, the orchestra dais, the path of Serena's final waltz. It was a habit from her previous life as a copy editor for a major publishing house, where she'd often mapped out plot lines for the mystery novels that crossed her desk. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Mayor Evans, his normally jovial face creased with genuine distress. "Lucy, terrible business, just terrible," he sighed, sinking into the worn armchair by the history section. The gala was supposed to secure the funding for the old lighthouse restoration. Now, well, who knows what will happen. "It's an awful shock for everyone," Lucy agreed softly. "Did you see what happened?" The mayor's eyes shifted away for a fraction of a second. "I was across the room, chatting with the Bartletts. One moment she was dancing, the picture of health, the next—" He shook his head. "It was the final turn of the waltz. A dreadful coincidence." The final turn. The phrase echoed in Lucy's mind long after the mayor had left, his spirits only slightly lifted by the blueberry scone Lucy had pressed into his hand. Coincidence? Perhaps. But Lucy had learned from a lifetime of reading mysteries that coincidence was often the universe's way of being obvious. Driven by a compulsion she couldn't name, she decided to pay a visit to the one person who might have seen the event from a different angle, the orchestra conductor, a meticulous man named Mr. Albright, who ran the local music school. She found him in his soundproofed studio, looking pale and agitated, meticulously polishing his baton, as if trying to erase the memory of the previous night. "Mr. Albright," Lucy began gently, "I was at the gala last night. I'm so sorry you had to witness that." The conductor looked up, his eyes haunted. It was the Strauss, OP 354, Roses from the South, a beautiful piece. We were in the final 16 bars, the accelerando into the coda. He demonstrated with his baton, the movement sharp and precise. They were on the far side of the floor, executing a natural turn. She was in the promenade position, then the final pivot, and then his baton fell to his side. The music died. Lucy's heart beat a little faster. The technical language was a code, but one she felt she could crack. "The final pivot," she repeated. Would that have been a moment of instability? Could she have simply lost her footing? Mr. Albright drew himself up, a flicker of professional pride cutting through his distress. "Madam, the Viennese waltz is a dance of precision and flow. A couple of their caliber does not simply lose their footing. Every step, every turn is a deliberate action. It was as if her string was cut, precisely on the beat." He looked at her, his gaze intense. It was the most musical of tragedies. Musical. The word hung in the air as Lucy walked back to her bookshop. A musical tragedy. Steps and turns on a beat. She thought of Alistair Van Der Woodsen's stiff posture, his restraining hand. She thought of the starlight sapphire, flashing like a blue warning. The official story of a tragic, natural death was beginning to feel as flimsy as tissue paper. Someone, Lucy was now convinced, had composed a very different ending to Serena Van Der Woodsen's waltz, and every step of that dance was a hidden note in a melody of murder. Chapter 3. The Van Der Woodsen mansion, Cliff's End, was a hulking Queen Anne revival that brooded on the headland overlooking the churning Atlantic. It was the kind of house that had secrets built into its very gables and turrets. 2 days after the gala, Lucy found herself walking up the crushed-shelled driveway, feeling like an extra in a Gothic novel. She'd concocted a flimsy pretext about the bookstore's monthly newsletter and a potential feature on local philanthropists, a tribute to Serena. It was thin, but it was a key to the door. She was received not by the grieving widower, but by Isabella Reed, Serena's personal assistant. Isabella was a woman in her early 30s, sleek and efficient as a scalpel, dressed in a severely tailored black dress that seemed to absorb the light from the grand foyer. Her grief appeared to be of the professional, bottled variety. "Mr. Van Der Woodsen is not receiving visitors," she said, her voice cool and devoid of inflection. "The family appreciates the community's concern." The slight pause before concern suggested she found the concern more intrusive than comforting. "I understand completely," Lucy said, infusing her voice with warmth. "It must be a devastating time. I just wanted to express my condolences and, perhaps when the time is right, learn a little more about Serena's work for the Preservation Society. She was so passionate about it." A flicker of something annoyance crossed Isabella's perfectly composed face. Mrs. Van Der Woodsen was passionate about many things. Her public image was one of them. It was an odd, almost catty remark, and Lucy filed it away. It must have been a demanding role, supporting her, Lucy pressed gently. "Every role in this house is demanding, especially when you're dancing to someone else's tune." She seemed to realize she'd said too much and snapped her attention back to Lucy. "Now, if you'll excuse me, there are arrangements to be made." As she was being ushered out, a door down the hall opened, and Alistair Van Der Woodsen emerged. He looked a decade older than he had at the gala, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. He wasn't alone. A handsome, silver-haired man Lucy recognized as Dr. Julian Croft, the town's most respected physician and a close family friend, had a supportive hand on his arm. "Just need to rest, Alistair," Dr. Croft was saying in a low, soothing voice. "The shock will take time to process." Alistair waved a dismissive hand. "It's the business, Julian. The vultures are already circling. Without Serena—" His voice broke, and he noticed Lucy for the first time. A mask of polite confusion slid over his grief. "I'm sorry, have we—" "Lucy Bennett, from the bookstore," Lucy supplied. "I was just offering my condolences." "Ah." Alistair's gaze was distant. "Thank you. She loved that little shop." He seemed about to say more when his eyes caught a portrait of Serena hanging in the foyer, a vibrant painting that captured her in mid-laugh. A spasm of pain contorted his fixtures. "She was the life of every party, and I was always just keeping time," he murmured, almost to himself. Dr. Croft gently steered him away, throwing an apologetic glance at Lucy. "He's not himself. It's best to let him be." Back outside in the salt-tinged air, Lucy felt her mind whirring. Dancing to someone else's tune, Isabella's bitter words, keeping time, Alistair's poignant confession. Both phrases painted a picture of a household where roles were strictly defined and perhaps resented. And Dr. Croft's presence was interesting, a comforting friend or something more. The waltz, it seemed, wasn't confined to the ballroom. It was a metaphor for the entire Van Der Woodsen life, a beautiful, public performance hiding a much more complex and private rhythm of strain, duty, and secrets. The question was, who had decided to change the music? Chapter 4. Seaglass Cove's gossip mill had a central hub, the Salty Mermaid, a cozy cafe with checkered tablecloths and the best clam chowder on the coast. It was here, nestled in a corner booth with Ilara, that Lucy decided to do some informal investigating. Ilara, having lived in the Cove for 85 years, was a walking, talking archive of the town's social history. "The Van Der Woodsens," Ilara said, stirring her latte with a thoughtful air. "Now, there's a story. Old money, of course. Alistair's grandfather made his fortune in shipping. Serena, she was new money. Her family was in tech. A merger, more than a marriage, some said. But they made it work. For appearances, at least." "Were there troubles?" Lucy asked, keeping her voice casual. "Oh, the usual whispers." Ilara leaned in conspiratorially. "Alistair has always been a bit of a cold fish, more interested in his stock portfolios than his wife's charity galas. And Serena, well, she had a thirst for life. She loved the spotlight. Some thought she enjoyed the company of certain attentive gentlemen a little too much." "Like who?" Lucy prompted. "Well, Dr. Croft, for one," Ilara said, lowering her voice further. "They were thick as thieves, always having their heads together at committee meetings. And then there's that new architect, Leo Vance, handsome as the devil. Serena insisted the Preservation Society hire him to oversee the lighthouse project, even though he's from out of town. Caused quite a stir, that did. Alistair was reportedly not amused. Lucy stored the name Leo Vance away. An out-of-town architect, a potential point of friction in the marriage. Their conversation was interrupted by a florid-faced man in a tweed jacket, huffing as he sat at the counter. "Bad business about Serena. The society won't be the same without her. And who's going to front the cash for the lighthouse now, eh? Alistair never cared for it. I think it's a money pit." "That's Hugh Bartlett," Ilara whispered to Lucy. "Runs the local antique shop. A dreadful gossip, but he usually knows which way the wind is blowing." Lucy watched as Hugh Bartlett complained loudly about the potential collapse of the lighthouse project. His investment in it seemed more than just civic pride. Later, when Lucy visited his cluttered antique shop under the guise of looking for a reading lamp, she found him still fuming. "A tragedy, a real tragedy," Hugh said, though his tone was more aggrieved than mournful. Serena had vision. She understood the value of history, unlike some. He didn't name Alistair, but the implication was clear. "She promised the lighthouse would be my legacy project. I'd sourced all the original fixtures. Now it'll likely all fall through. Alistair will pull the funding. You mark my words." He never supported her passions, felt threatened by them, if you ask me. The picture of the Van Der Woodsen marriage was becoming clearer, and it was far from the fairy tale presented at the gala. It was a partnership of convenience strained by mismatched passions, his for money and stability, hers for legacy and admiration. Resentment seemed to simmer just below the surface of their polished life. Had that resentment finally boiled over? Had a disagreement about money or a project or an attentive gentleman escalated into something far more deadly? The waltz of their marriage, it appeared, had been danced on a knife's edge long before the night of the gala. Someone, it seemed, had just given it a final, fatal push. Chapter 5. Lucy's next stop was the offices of the Seaglass Cove Preservation Society, housed in a charming, if slightly dilapidated, historic carriage house. The air inside was thick with the smell of old paper and dust, a scent Lucy found comforting. She was hoping to get a sense of Serena's world, the projects she was passionate about, and the people she worked with. She was greeted by a young, flustered-looking woman named Chloe, who was the society's secretary. The place was in a state of subdued chaos, with files stacked everywhere and a wilting bouquet of flowers on Chloe's desk, a sad tribute. "It's just awful," Chloe said, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mrs. Van Der Woodsen was... she was a force. She made things happen. Now Everything has just stopped. I heard she was very dedicated to the lighthouse project. Oh, it was her baby, Chloe exclaimed. She fought for it tooth and nail. Mr. Van Der Woodsen thought it was a frivolous expense, but she was determined. She said that it was the key to revitalizing the whole north end of the cove. She gestured to a large architectural rendering pinned to the wall. It showed the old lighthouse restored to its former glory, with a new visitor center attached. It was signed at the bottom, Leo Vance, architect. "He's talented, isn't he?" Lucy commented, studying the drawing. Chloe's cheeks pinkened slightly. "Mr. Vance is very passionate. He and Mrs. Van Der Woodsen worked very closely together. They were a great team." Just then, the door to the carriage house opened, and a man strode in. He was in his late 30s, with tousled dark hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of intense, focused energy that seemed to change the atmosphere in the room. He was dressed in practical work clothes, a far cry from the black tie formality of the gala, but Lucy recognized him from Elia's description. This was Leo Vance. "Chloe, I need the core sample reports from the North Bluff," he said, his voice a low baritone. Then he noticed Lucy. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a visitor." "This is Lucy Bennett. She runs the bookshop. Lucy, this is Leo Vance, our architect." Leo's gaze sharpened with interest. "The bookshop, the final chapter, right? I've been meaning to stop in. I'm a sucker for a good mystery." He offered a hand, his grip firm and warm. His eyes behind the glasses were a startlingly clear hazel, and for a moment, Lucy forgot why she was there. "I was just admiring your rendering," Lucy said, recovering her composure. "It's beautiful." "Serena's vision," he said, and a shadow passed over his face. The charm evaporated, replaced by a raw, genuine grief that took Lucy by surprise. He believed in this town, in its history. He saw the story in these old stones. He looked at the drawing, his jaw tight. "I don't know if it will happen now. Without her—" He trailed off, shaking his head. His sorrow seemed too immediate, too personal for a professional relationship. It confirmed Elia's insinuations. There had been a connection between Serena and Leo, one that went beyond architect and patron. Was it a mutual passion for history, or something more? Had that passion kerneled into something dangerous? A rejected suitor? Or was his grief a mask for something else? Guilt, perhaps. Leo excused himself abruptly, grabbing a folder from Chloe and striding out, leaving a void of silence in his wake. Lucy's theory was getting more complicated. The list of people with motives was growing. A resentful husband, a bitter assistant, a jilted business associate, and now a handsome, grieving architect who might have been in love with the victim. The melody of the mystery was no longer a simple waltz. It was becoming a complex, dissonant piece with too many players, each marching to the beat of their own secret drum. Chapter 6. A week after the gala, the official toxicology report was released. The news rippled through Seaglass Cove with the force of a shockwave. Serena Van Der Woodsen had died from a lethal dose of digitalis, a heart medication derived from foxglove plants. The ruling was homicide. The town, which had been murmuring, now erupted into full-blown panic and speculation. Police Chief Henderson, a man more accustomed to dealing with stolen bicycles and parking violations, found himself at the center of a murder investigation. He gave another press conference, his face grim, appealing for calm and any information the public might have. Lucy read the news in the Seaglass Cove Sentinel, her heart pounding. Her suspicions were confirmed. It was murder. And the method was so intimate. Poison was a killer's weapon, requiring planning, access, and a certain coldness. It wasn't a crime of passion in a heated moment. It was a calculated execution. Driven by a newfound sense of urgency, Lucy decided to share her observations with Chief Henderson. She found him in his cramped office at the police station, surrounded by files and looking overwhelmed. "Chief Henderson, Lucy Bennett. We met at the gala." The chief looked up, his expression weary. "Ah, the bookshop lady. What can I do for you? If you're here to tell me you saw something suspicious, half the town has already been in." "It's about the waltz," Lucy said, undeterred. She laid out her notepad with the ballroom sketch. "I've been speaking with Mr. Albright, the conductor. He was very specific about the timing." She collapsed on the final pivot of a natural turn. It was precisely on the beat. Chief Henderson blinked at her. "The beat?" "Yes," Lucy said, leaning forward. "Don't you see? The poison had to be administered in a way that its effects would manifest at that exact moment. It means the killer knew the routine, knew the music, knew the dance. They timed it." The chief sighed, rubbing his temples. "Miss Bennett, I appreciate you coming in. I really do. But we're looking at hard evidence. Toxicology reports, opportunity, motive. We can't arrest someone because they have a good sense of rhythm." He gestured to the files on his desk. "We're following solid leads. Mr. Van Der Woodsen's finances are a mess, and it seems a large life insurance policy was taken out on his wife 6 months ago. The assistant, Miss Reed, stands to inherit a significant sum from a secret trust fund Serena set up. And this architect, Vance, well, let's just say his business was in trouble before Serena hired him. He was desperate." She stared at him. He had the suspects, he had the motives, but he was missing the poetry of the crime, the chilling precision of it. He was looking at the what and the who, but not the how. And the how was everything. "But the timing," she started again, "is consistent with a slow-acting poison ingested sometime during the evening." The chief finished for her, his tone final. "We're testing the leftover food and drink from her table. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a murder to solve, the real way." Stung, Lucy left the station. The chief saw her as a meddling outsider, a cozy mystery reader trying to play detective. But she knew she was onto something. The dance was the key. The killer hadn't just wanted Serena dead, they had wanted her to die in a specific way, at a specific moment, publicly, dramatically, in the middle of the things she loved most. It was a message. It was a performance. And Lucy was the only one in the audience who seemed to understand the language it was written in. If the police wouldn't listen, she would have to follow the steps herself.
Chapter 7. Rebuffed by the police, Lucy turned her attention to the murder weapon itself, digitalis, a poison derived from foxgloves. It was a plant both beautiful and deadly, a paradox that fit the crime perfectly. Where would the killer have gotten it, and how was it administered? Her research at the bookshop, a deep dive into her own botany and toxicology sections, revealed that digitalis, in its raw plant form, was unpredictable. To get a lethal, timed dose, the killer would likely have used a refined concentrate. That suggested knowledge and preparation. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision to crush some flowers from a garden into a drink. Who in Seaglass Cove had that knowledge? The most obvious answer was Dr. Julian Croft. He had the medical expertise, the access to pharmaceuticals, and he was a close friend of the family, giving him opportunity. But what was his motive? Lucy decided to pay a visit to the Good Health Clinic, the small, white-painted practice where Dr. Croft had served the community for 30 years. She fabricated a reason for her visit, a persistent headache, but her real goal was to get a sense of the man. The clinic was calm and smelled of antiseptic. Dr. Croft himself was exactly as she remembered from the mansion, silver-haired, avuncular, with a soothing, trustworthy demeanor. He examined her with gentle efficiency. "Stress, most likely, Miss Bennett," he said, giving her a kind smile. "A new business, a new town, and with this dreadful business with Serena, it's affected us all." "It's just so hard to believe," Lucy ventured, watching him carefully, "that someone could do that to her, with poison of all things." Dr. Croft's smile faded, replaced by a look of profound sadness. "A coward's weapon. It requires no confrontation, just a cold, calculated act." He turned to wash his hands at the sink. "In my line of work, We see medicines as tools for healing. To see one perverted in such a way is a desecration. Would it be difficult to get hold of something like that? Lucy asked, trying to sound innocently curious. He turned, drying his hands, his expression now professionally guarded. For the general public, virtually impossible without a prescription. The dosage is far too critical. A few milligrams can be the difference between a therapeutic dose and a fatal one. He looked at her intently. The police have already been down this road, Miss Bennett. My inventory is perfectly accounted for. Lucy felt a flush creep up her neck. He had seen right through her. I didn't mean to imply. Of course you didn't, he said, his avuncular tone returning, though it now felt slightly forced. We're all just trying to make sense of the senseless. But sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. Look for the person with the most to gain. It's rarely as theatrical as the mystery novels would have us believe. Chastened, Lucy left the clinic. Dr. Croft was smooth, intelligent, and had just deftly pointed the finger away from himself and towards the simplest answer, Alistair. But his knowledge of the poison was precise, and his defense of his inventory was a little too quick. He was a possible suspect, but was he a dancer? Could this calm, measured man have choreographed a murder to the beat of a waltz? As she walked home, her path took her past the community gardens on the edge of town. The plots were a riot of summer color, and there, standing tall and elegant in one particularly well-tended plot, was a cluster of foxgloves, their spotted throats seeming to mock her. Did huge Bartlett have the botanical knowledge to refine a poison? He dealt in old things, in history. Perhaps he knew old forgotten arts. The lighthouse was his legacy, and Serena was his champion. But with her gone, the project was likely to fail, unless her death served another purpose for him. A motive was still unclear, but the means were now literally growing in his backyard. The plot, like the garden, was becoming increasingly tangled. Chapter 8. Frustrated by dead ends and suspects who seemed to have both means and opportunity, but murky motives, Lucy decided to take a more direct approach. She needed to understand the emotional landscape of the Van Der Woodsen household, and there was one person she hadn't properly spoken to, Isabella Reed. She found the assistant not at the mansion, but at a secluded corner table in the library of the country club, a laptop open before her and a single espresso cup at her elbow. She looked up as Lucy approached, her expression one of immediate suspicion. Miss Bennett, I'm rather busy. This won't take long, Lucy said, sitting down without being invited. I'm trying to understand Serena. Everyone seems to have a different version of her. The generous philanthropist, the demanding employee, the neglected wife. Isabella's lips tightened into a thin line. She was all of those things. People are complicated, especially when they're dancing to someone else's tune, Lucy said softly, repeating Isabella's own words back to her. A flash of surprise, then anger, lit Isabella's eyes. You have no idea what it was like, the constant demands, the last-minute changes, living in her shadow, managing her life, her schedule, her moods. For years. And for what? A pittance until she deigned to put me in her will as an afterthought? The bitterness was corrosive and unmistakable. It must have been galling to see her shower money and attention on projects like the lighthouse while you felt undervalued. Isabella let out a short, harsh laugh. The lighthouse, her pet project with her pet architect. It was embarrassing. The whole town was talking about them. Mr. Van Der Woodsen was a laughingstock. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. But he's not as weak as he looks. He knew, and he hated it. He hated the embarrassment more than he hated losing her, I think. This was a new perspective. Alistair, the cuckolded husband, humiliated and angry, that was a classic motive. But was it strong enough for murder? And did it fit the method? And you? Lucy pressed. Did you hate it? Isabella leaned back, her mask of cool competence slamming back into place,
I am a professional, Miss Bennett. My personal feelings are irrelevant. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a funeral to plan. Unlike some, I am still doing my job." She snapped her laptop shut and walked away without a backward glance. Lucy sat for a moment, processing the vitriol. Isabella had a motive, years of resentment and a financial payoff. She had opportunity. As Serena's assistant, she could easily have access to her food and drink, and her bitterness certainly provided the coldness required for poison. But as she replayed the conversation, one phrase stuck out. "He's not as weak as he looks." It was almost defensive, as if Isabella, despite her anger, felt a flicker of loyalty or pity for Alistair. Or was it something else? Was she pointing the finger at him to protect herself? Or was she genuinely warning Lucy that the quiet, stoic husband was capable of more than anyone knew? The conversation had given her a clearer view of the resentment festering within Cliff's End, but it had also muddied the waters. Everyone seemed to have a reason to want Serena gone. The challenge was figuring out whose reason had finally tipped over into murderous action and how they had used the waltz to stage their final, deadly act. Chapter 9. The day of Serena Van Der Woodsen's funeral was a gray, drizzly affair, perfectly mirroring the mood of the town. The service at the old stone church was packed, a sea of black umbrellas and somber faces. Lucy stood at the back, observing. Alistair looked broken, supported physically by Dr. Croft. Isabella was a statue of efficient grief, organizing the floral arrangements and the order of service with cold precision. Hugh Bartlett blew his nose loudly into a handkerchief. Leo Vance stood alone under a dripping oak tree at the edge of the churchyard, his head bowed, his isolation palpable. After the somber procession left for the private burial, Lucy found Leo still standing there, staring at the freshly turned earth of another, older grave. "It was a beautiful service," Lucy said quietly, coming to stand beside him. He started, then gave her a sad, fleeting smile. It was. Full of the right words. She would have hated it. She preferred action to words. Like the lighthouse, he echoed, his gaze drifting towards the coast, though the lighthouse itself was hidden by the rain and the town's skyline. "It's over now. Alistair has already frozen the funds. All that work for nothing." "Was it just work for you, Leo?" Lucy asked gently. The directness of the question hung in the damp air. He turned to look at her, his hazel eyes full of a pain that was too raw to be fabricated. "What are you asking me, Lucy? Did I love her?" He let out a long, shaky breath. "Yes, I think I did. She was magnetic. She saw the potential in things, in buildings, in people." He looked down at his hands. But it was a hopeless thing. She would never have left Alistair. Not for his money, not for the social position, and certainly not for a struggling architect from the wrong side of the tracks. "Hopeless love can sometimes turn to hate," Selena suggested carefully. "Not for me," he said, his voice firm. "I would never have hurt her. I wanted to build her legacy, not destroy it." He gestured around the graveyard. This is the end of the story. I wanted to help her write a new chapter." His words had the ring of truth. He seemed less like a killer and more like a fellow mourner, someone else whose life had been irrevocably altered by Serena's death. But Lucy had to be sure. Desperation did strange things to people. "The police think you were desperate, that your business was failing." Leo laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "My business is always failing, Lucy. That's the nature of architecture when you care more about history than profit. Serena knew that. She was my patron, yes, but she was also my friend. She believed in my work. Killing her would be like burning down my own studio. It makes no sense." It didn't. As Lucy walked away from the churchyard, she felt a conviction growing. Leo Vance was not her killer. His motive was the weakest of all. Financial desperation was negated by the fact that killing her patron destroyed his only source of income.
and a crime of passion didn't fit the cold, premeditated nature of the poisoning. He was a red herring, a convenient suspect for a police chief who wanted a simple answer. Which brought her back to the core trio: Alistair, Isabella, and Dr. Croft. One of them had danced with death, and Lucy was determined to learn the steps.
Chapter 10. That night, unable to sleep, Lucy found herself in her bookshop's back room, surrounded by the comforting smell of old paper. She had pinned her ballroom sketch to a corkboard and was adding names, motives, and opportunities, creating a web of connections that was as complex as any mystery novel she'd ever read. She kept coming back to the dance, the precision, Mr. Albright's words, precisely on the beat. How could the killer be sure? Digitalis could take varying times to act, depending on the dose, the concentration, Serena's metabolism that day. It was too variable. Unless... Lucy sat bolt upright. Unless the poison wasn't ingested hours before. What if it was administered during the dance itself? What if the final pivot of the waltz wasn't just the trigger for the poison's effect, but the very mechanism of its delivery? She grabbed her laptop, searching for videos of the Viennese waltz. She watched couples spin, their hands clasped, the man's right hand on the woman's back. In a natural turn, the couple pivoted closely, their bodies in tight contact. The man's right hand, it would be positioned right at the center of her back, just between the shoulder blades. A wild idea began to form. What if the poison wasn't in her drink or her food? What if it was delivered through the skin? A needle, hidden in a ring or a thimble, pressed into her back during that final, intimate pivot. A small, precise puncture, the pain masked by the pressure of the dance and the adrenaline of the performance. It would be almost undetectable, and the timing would be perfect. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was theatrical, it was brilliant, it was insane, and it fit the killer's profile perfectly. Someone who saw murder as a performance, a dark piece of choreography. But who? Alistair was her dance partner. He had his hands on her. He had the most direct opportunity, but would he risk it in front of hundreds of people? Isabella was on the sidelines, but she could have rigged something. A pin in his glove? Dr. Croft had the medical knowledge to administer an injection with precision, but he wasn't dancing with her. She thought of Alistair's stiff posture, his hand on her back that seemed less a guide and more a placement, a deliberate fixed position. She thought of his poignant words. She was the life of every party, and I was always just keeping time. Keeping time. The beat. The final pivot. A cold certainty settled over her. She knew how it was done. Now she had to prove who had orchestrated this deadly dance.
Chapter 11. Lucy went to see Chief Henderson again, this time with a new fire in her eyes. She laid out her theory about the needle, the dance, and the timed delivery. To her surprise, he didn't dismiss her outright. He looked tired, and the evidence against his suspects was becoming circumstantial at best. It's a theory, Miss Bennett, a wild one. But we found no needle, no mechanism. We examined Alistair's clothing and hands that night. Nothing. Maybe he didn't use his own hands, Lucy said, her mind racing. What if he was an accomplice? Or what if he was manipulated? She asked the chief for one thing, to let her into the Van Der Woodsen's mansion's private quarters, specifically Alistair's dressing room. Reluctantly, seeing the desperate logic in her eyes, he agreed, sending a young officer with her. The room was opulent and masculine, all dark wood and leather. Lucy ignored the suits and the shoes. She went to the jewelry box on the dresser. Cufflinks, tie pins, watches. And then she saw it. A signet ring, heavy and gold. It was a family heirloom, the Van Der Woodsen crest. But as she picked it up, she felt a tiny, almost imperceptible seam around the crest. She pressed it. With a soft click, the crest sprang open, revealing a tiny, hollow compartment. It was empty, but a faint, acrid smell lingered. It would have held the poison concentrate, Lucy whispered, her blood running cold. He wore it.
during the dance on his right hand. On the final pivot, he pressed her close, and the hidden needle inside the ring. She couldn't finish the sentence. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough. Chief Henderson brought Alistair Van Der Woodsen in for questioning. Lucy watched from behind the one-way mirror. At first, Alistair was the picture of offended grief, but as the chief laid out Lucy's theory, mentioning the ring, the dance, the timing, his composure began to crack. "It was her tune," he whispered, his voice ragged. "Always her tune. The gala, the lighthouse, that boy, Vance. I was a prop in my own life, a banker, a provider, a dancing bear. She was going to leave me. She told me that night, before the gala. She was going to divorce me, take half my fortune, and fund her precious lighthouse with that architect." "So you killed her," the chief said, his voice flat. "I gave her the final dance she deserved," he said, his head held high with a twisted pride. "A public performance, a perfect ending. I kept time one last time, and on the final beat, I set myself free." It was a confession. Chilling, calculated, and utterly devoid of genuine regret. He hadn't killed her in a rage. He had executed her as part of a plan, turning the thing she loved most into her death sentence. The betrayal was as perfect and as cold as the steps of the waltz itself.
Chapter 12. The fallout from Alistair Van Der Woodsen's arrest rocked Seaglass Cove to its core. The quiet, stoic husband was a cold-blooded killer. The story of the ring, the poison, and the timed waltz became the stuff of local legend, a dark fairy tale whispered over coffee at the Salty Mermaid. A few weeks later, a small gathering was held at the country club. Not a gala, but a quiet, determined meeting of the Preservation Society. With Serena gone and Alistair in jail, the Lighthouse Project should have been dead. But it wasn't. Leo Vance stood before the group, a new, quieter determination in his eyes. "Serena believed in this," he said, "and so do I. I'm not giving up. We'll find a new way to fund it. We'll make it happen." To everyone's surprise, Isabella Reed stood up. She had inherited the money from Serena's trust, and it seemed a shred of her former employer's resolve. She said, "I will provide the funding. Consider it severance pay." It was a peace offering, to the town and to Serena's memory. Mayor Evans beamed, his faith in his community restored. Dr. Croft nodded his approval, his role as the comforting friend now genuine. Hugh Bartlett was already talking about the original brass fittings he could finally order now. Lucy stood at the back of the room, a quiet smile on her face. The mystery was solved, the killer caught, and the town was healing, finding a new rhythm. The grand ballroom was empty now, the floor silent. But as she looked around at the determined faces, she knew that life in Seaglass Cove was moving on to a new melody, one of resilience and community. Leo Vance caught her eye and walked over, a genuine smile gracing his features for the first time since she'd met him. "We did it." "Well, you did it. You heard the music no one else could." "It was a terrible song," Lucy replied softly. "But it's over, and a new one is starting." He looked at the empty dance floor, then back at her, a hint of his old charm returning. "Maybe when this is all over, you'd let me buy you a coffee. No mystery, no murder. Just conversation." Lucy looked at this passionate, complicated man and the little town she was now undeniably a part of. She thought of her bookshop, of Elara's gossip, of the cozy, complicated drama of small-town life. "I'd like that," Lucy Bennett said, and for the first time in a long time, she was perfectly content to let the future unfold, one step at a time. And so, the music fades on another mystery in Seaglass Cove. But the story doesn't have to end here. If you enjoyed unraveling the ballroom betrayal, you'll love getting lost in our other tales. Dive into my channel and discover many more stories. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring more stories to life.
Please help our community grow by subscribing to the channel and ringing the bell so you never miss a new mystery. I'd love to hear from you. Who was your prime suspect in the ballroom? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep wondering and keep solving. From Whisper Glass Stories, have a great time.